Living water from the heart. I want to remind you of a few places in the Bible where it talks about water. There's the part in John where Jesus speaks to the Samaritan woman at the well. And of course, the well is Jacob's well. And if you live in the Middle East, you understand the dryness and you understand how important water is for life. So it's no surprise that water has become an important way of expressing not only life, but blessings from God. And so if you go through the Bible, one of the key words, if you want to look at a word to consider the different themes that occur in the Bible, you could go through and read every reference to water, and you would have some understanding of the magnitude of water to life. There's also references to the living water of the Lord. There's references to living water pouring out from Jerusalem to the land around it. In the book of Revelation, there's the water of life without cost, water that is within us. And then, of course, there's this reference in John to living water from the heart. But that second aspect of this reading, the heart, which I referred to you earlier, is a very interesting word to consider in the Bible. I have a concordance on my bookshelf, and I look up some words just to see how common is that word. You know, like where does it show up first? Where does it show up last? What happens all in between? And there's over 700 uses of the word heart in the Bible. I went through a lot of them. I can't say that I did every single one. I could not find a reference, a single reference to the physical heart. So what that tells you is that in the Bible, every step of the way, the reference to the heart was referring to our spiritual heart, or a part of us that has a different level of meaning or understanding as part of our human anatomy, in a sense. And when I say human anatomy, I'm including our spiritual anatomy as well as our physical anatomy. Because when we speak of the heart or from the heart, we probably begin by thinking that we understand what we mean when we say that, right? I mean, how many of you, let me say it this way. I believe that all of you do something similar to what Stelly and I do whenever we're away from each other. And that is, you say something like, "You're always in my heart," or "I keep you in my heart," or "You are my heart." That kind of reference. And I think that when we do that, we're not referring to the physical heart. We're referring to that spiritual heart that's inside of us. And we're also referring to something that probably is saying something like our hearts are connected in some way, that there's something that is, I don't know, maybe one of those strings in string theory that goes from one part of the universe to the other. It kind of goes from my heart to hers, or your hearts to whoever you love. When we speak from the heart, what do we speak from? Well, we speak with sincerity. We speak with authenticity. But also there's a sense, and I think that this is something that was peculiar to Jesus in a way, there's also a sense of authority, meaning that if it comes from the heart, it's coming from that seat of authority that sits inside of us. It's almost like if you speak from your heart, it's so obvious if it's not true. Meaning that most of the time when you speak from your heart, there is a truth that you feel. Even if it's just the experience of the person speaking, and it's not our experience, we can understand sort of the gravitas of someone speaking from their heart. There are so many references of the heart of God in the Bible. And then there are these references to the heart of humankind. The very first reference to the heart is in Genesis, when God's heart feels the pain of what is described as the human heart's inclination toward evil. Imagine the person that first wrote those words. We don't know who it was. We're told that Moses wrote the books of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, but he dies in Deuteronomy before you get to the end, so we know that doesn't quite hold up. But what we feel in that moment, perhaps, aside from it just being this biblical story about the Tower of Babylon and different things related to the inclination of the human heart being evil, there's a kind of a despair in the moment, a kind of a hurt that we can feel for the person who wrote that. Because whoever wrote Genesis probably contributed to the other books of the Bible, and by the time we get to Deuteronomy, something different happens. Now, I don't know the length of time between Abraham and Moses. It's kind of open to dispute, especially if you think the world's only 5,000 years old. But by the time we get to Deuteronomy, one of my favorite passages in the Bible is in Deuteronomy 30, where Joshua is speaking to the tribes of Israel, and he says, you know, what you need, you don't have to go up into heaven to get. You don't need to send someone across the water to get. What you need is already written in your heart. So there's a reference to the law without saying 10 Commandments or whatever. But the idea is that the depth of who we are and the essence of who we are in our relationship to God is in our heart, this kind of spiritual organ that exists in the center of our being. So what happens in the New Testament? Well, the first reference in the New Testament is in the Sermon on the Mount, to the heart. And the first verse about the heart in the Beatitudes is, "Blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God." Jesus appealed to the heart of the people that came to see him. And there's a lot of people, a lot of theologians or biblical scholars who believe that one of the greatest qualities that Jesus had as a speaker and as a person that tried to connect to the people that he was speaking to was that when he gave them a truth, something that was a piece of wisdom or a true saying, they believed that he connected with them in such a way that they understood what he said to be true because they already knew in their hearts that it was true. There wasn't a truth because there was a reference to the book of Isaiah, or there wasn't a truth because there was a reference to the Torah. There wasn't a truth because there was a reference to any of the prophets or Proverbs or any of the other scriptures that we have today, because most people at that time didn't read. Only a very few people read. And unless they happened to be in the temple, they may not have heard any of the text being read. And the reason I say the temple is because the idea of a synagogue was a very new idea at that time, that there were small places of worship spread out in Israel among the Jewish people. So he had to speak in such a way that a person could confirm what he was saying in their own hearts. And of course, by what I've said, that authority that comes, they had to understand that he was speaking from his heart. So we have that connection between the two things there. Last week I talked about the eyes of the heart being enlightened. And when we think of the eyes of the heart, it's almost like we use that same sense of what's inside of us in this sort of heart-centered part of us to be able to see the world, so that we kind of can look out and see the impact of what we do, or the place that we need to give our effect. In our prayer that Stelly led us through, our unison prayer, we talked about our ability to be a partner with God. If you look at the words carefully, we ask that when we need to act, we act with purpose and compassion. So we're speaking to God in such a way that there's an understanding of the heart being connected to the heart of God. So just think about the heart as this place where there is this compassion. We understand that because of love. This place where there is a certain kind of truth, because truth and love are kind of always intertwined in some way. We can think of it as a place where this seat of authority resides, where that most authentic part of us lives and where we speak from. It's almost like saying, if you don't have all of those things present, you really don't have any authority as a human being. If you take any of those things out of an expression that you make from your heart, it's kind of missing the gravitas, it's missing the power, it's missing some kind of energy that tells whoever you're speaking to how present you are in the moment, how important what you have to say is in the moment. While I was going through all the references to the heart, I always find something new that I hadn't thought about before, which is not unusual in a text as big as the Bible. I mean, quite a lot there. And we have this idea in Christianity that when Jesus died, that what's the words of the creed, that he descended into hell and then rose again after 3 days. That was put in our creed because there was worry on the part of those writing the creed that the people that came before Jesus, where were they? Because if you had to believe in Jesus in order to get to heaven, well, he wasn't here yet. So there's Moses and all those people that came beforehand. So it's almost like saying, well, he had to go back and redeem everybody. Okay, so he had to go not just into hell, but wherever everything existed prior to Jesus. But you know what? There's no scriptural reference to that. When Jesus spoke himself about giving the sign of Jonah, of dying and then rising again in 3 days, he says that he would descend into the heart of the earth. That's quite a different meaning when you think of all the other references to the heart in the Bible. It doesn't seem like that would be going to a bad place, does it? It would be going to a place of power, a place of authority, a place of connection, a place of real meaning in terms of what it means to be part of the earth, to be part of this world, and to rise again from that would be like a resurrection. To stand up again, which is what he tells Lazarus when he asks him to come out of the tomb. The words that he uses in Aramaic are stand up and come out. So where am I going with all this? What does it have to do with this red color? Nobody in the choir associated the color red with the heart when we were first talking about it, but Diane said, well, passion, that's love, the heart, okay. We associate red with Spirit, the Holy Spirit. I think what we're saying, or what I'm saying, just like the song, that Spirit and the heart are connected as well. That to speak from the heart requires Spirit. Now, just like I said, you could go through the Bible with heart, you could go through the Bible with water, you can go with Spirit, which in the very beginning of the Bible is the wind that moves on the waters, the breath of God. So we have all of these things tied together. If you wanted to interpret the Bible as a unified book, which I don't believe that it was meant to be unified, but it does happen to have these common themes, all you would have to do is look up the words water, spirit, love, truth, and oneness. And you would find everything that we believe about our spirituality as human beings. Now, what happens in the book of Acts when the Holy Spirit descends on the people that are gathered, where they see tongues of fire above their heads, where they speak in the language of everybody present so that everybody hears. There's a wind, there's a breath. And in the early church, it was very common for the person giving the blessing to initiate other Christians into it by breathing on them after they were baptized, so that they would receive the Holy Spirit. All the time they were doing this, they would talk about what? The Sermon on the Mount, the Last Supper, how to have a meal of remembrance. All of the things that we talk about today. One of the things that seems to me to be said in this context here is that when you get it, you get it. Meaning that when you understand it, you receive it. Once you understand everything that Jesus says about the heart, you start to get it. When he says, I pray, God, that they love me the way you loved me, and the way that you love them, that I am in you and you are in me. All of the references that Jesus talks about that connection only make sense in one context, in the heart. How else would someone understand that? Just like we understand the reference I made to Stelly and I, when we're apart, we are in each other's heart. When we are together, we are in each other's heart. So when you get it, then you get it. And the Spirit comes. But you have to get it because the heart is the seat of who we are. How can you understand all of this that's happening between Jesus and the disciples and the people that come to see him without understanding that it's about love and compassion and truth and the heart? It's the beginning place for us as human beings when we come into our own, our identity. And what is that? It's the life that's in us. It's the love that's in us. It's the Spirit that descends upon us. We can speak of it as a breath or a wind. But when it comes to us and it resides with us, where is it going to reside? It's going to reside in our heart, in that spiritual part of our being that somehow might mean something like heart, soul, mind, body, everything combined into who we are. And when we see another human being, if we have a pure heart, seeing another human being is like seeing God. Even though they may be a mess on the surface, even though they may have all kinds of trouble and difficulty for us, to know that inside of them is this place called the heart that's not our anatomical heart. And that when the Spirit of God descends, it emerges from that place. It's kind of a unique understanding in a certain way. Not that it hasn't been spoken about in a lot of different ways, but when you realize that it holds all of these things for us, then the magnitude of it gets really big. Because it really rules everything that we say and do as human beings. Which is why in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about what's in your heart in relation to adultery, to murder, to lust, whatever. But when you get it, you get it. Not just understanding, but that Spirit. And I believe that's what Pentecost is. The reception of that Spirit in our hearts.